I remember the first time she handed me the keys. 3 of them on a brass ring, warm from her palm. "Just for a few days," she said, her voice light but careful, like she'd rehearsed it. "Water the plants. Feed the cat. That's all." But there was no cat. I learned that later. She stood on her porch in a linen shirt, sleeves rolled up, sun catching the silver threads in her hair. She didn't try to hide them. That's what I noticed first. The way she didn't hide anything, yet somehow kept everything to herself. Her name was Mara. She was my neighbor, the kind of woman people called put together because they had no idea how much she held back behind her stillness. I was 26. Between jobs, between plans, trying not to seem like I was waiting for something I couldn't name. "Sure," I told her, pocketing the keys. "I'll watch it." Her smile lingered longer than it should have. "I appreciate it," she said, and then she hesitated. Just for a second. That pause carried something that made my chest tighten. Something unspoken. When she turned to leave, her shoulder brushed mine. Barely, but enough to leave warmth that didn't fade for hours. The first evening, I went in just to check the place. She'd left the curtains half open, light spilling across a living room that smelled faintly of vanilla and old paper. There was a mug on the counter, lipstick on the rim, and a sweater folded on the couch like she might come back any minute. I should have just looked around and left. But something about the silence made me stay. Her house wasn't empty. It felt like her, soft, restrained, full of half-finished things. A book open face down on the armchair. A faint trace of perfume near the hallway. I found myself standing in her kitchen longer than made sense, fingertips tracing the edge of the counter. I imagined her there, morning light on her face, hair loose, pouring coffee. The image felt too clear, like I'd seen it before. Then the sound came, faint, rhythmic, from down the hall. I froze. It was the washing machine. Nothing strange. But the door to her bedroom was open halfway, and I swear the air in there was different. Warmer. Like the room was breathing. I didn't go in. Not then. I just stood at the threshold, the keys cold in my hand. 2 days later, she came back early. I was still inside, wiping down the counter when her car pulled up. I panicked. Not because I was doing anything wrong, but because I suddenly didn't know how to look normal. When she stepped in, she paused. Her eyes scanned the room, then landed on me. "You're still here," she said softly. I gestured vaguely, making sure everything was okay. She set down her bag and leaned against the doorframe, studying me. "You take things seriously," she murmured, almost amused. Then quieter, "That's rare." Her tone wasn't flirtatious. It was tired, maybe honest. The kind of honesty that slips out when you stop guarding yourself. I should have answered. Instead, I just looked at her. The faint lines near her mouth, the way her fingers played with the ring on her hand. She noticed my stare but didn't look away. For a long second, nothing moved. The air felt too full, like the whole house was holding its breath. Then the sound broke it, a knock at the door. Sharp, unexpected. She blinked, straightened, and whispered, almost to herself, "Not now." Her hand brushed my arm as she passed, light as static. And before she opened the door, she looked back once, eyes dark with something I couldn't name. The man at the door had been a delivery guy. Wrong address, wrong time. But the interruption left something between us, like a curtain that hadn't quite fallen back into place. After he left, Mara stayed standing there, her hands still on the doorframe. "You didn't have to wait for me," she said without turning around. I didn't mind. She looked over her shoulder, one eyebrow raised. Not accusing, more curious, like she was testing how far I'd go with honesty. I didn't have a good answer. She motioned for me to sit while she unpacked a paper bag. Groceries, a bottle of wine, a loaf of bread still warm. The house filled again with that quiet, unspoken rhythm. My eyes following her hands, her movements deliberate but slightly slower than necessary. When she poured the wine, her fingers brushed mine as she passed the glass. The touch barely lasted a second, but I forgot to breathe. Mara had been married once. I only learned that because she left an old photo on the counter one night. a man beside her, smiling too wide, his arm around her shoulders while she leaned just slightly away. The picture wasn't framed, just resting there, like she didn't know what to do with it. "He's not around anymore?" I asked carefully. "Not for a long time." She didn't elaborate, didn't need to. The pause after said enough, not grief but a kind of practiced emptiness. Then she asked, "What about you? Someone waiting for you somewhere?" I laughed too fast. "No one's that patient." She smiled at that, small, almost sympathetic. "Good," she said, and then caught herself. "I mean, you're young. You shouldn't be tied down." "Maybe I don't want to be that young." The air between us thickened at that. Her eyes flicked up, sharp and uncertain, then softened again. She changed the subject, asked about work, my plans, my family. But I could feel her drifting closer every time she reached for something on the table. The scent of her perfume was faint, earthy, with something warm beneath it. At one point, she stood behind me to reach for a glass, her sleeve brushing my shoulder. Her breath grazed the back of my neck. Neither of us moved right away. "I should," she started, stepping back, but her voice wavered. "Yeah," I said quickly, though I didn't know what I was agreeing to. Later, as I was about to leave, she walked me to the door. The porch light flickered, throwing her face half in shadow. "You've been kind," she said softly. "More than you know." "It's nothing." Her hand lifted, maybe to touch my arm, but she stopped midway, fingers curling slightly before falling to her side. "Don't say that," she whispered. "It's not nothing." The moment stretched. The air was damp with the promise of rain. She took a slow breath, met my eyes, and for the first time, she didn't look away. Rain came that night, soft at first, then harder, until the world outside her windows blurred into gray. I'd stopped by to drop off the spare keys. That was the excuse, anyway. She opened the door before I even knocked, like she'd been standing there waiting. "Come in," she said, quick and quiet. "You'll get soaked." Inside, the air smelled like cinnamon and wet earth. The storm made the house feel smaller, tighter, walls humming faintly with thunder. She was barefoot, hair tied up, wearing a loose sweater that hung off one shoulder. The casualness of it felt dangerous, like an invitation that wasn't one. I set the keys on the counter. "I should probably stay until it slows down," she said. Then, realizing how it sounded, added, "You'll catch cold." I nodded, even though neither of us believed that was the reason. We ended up sitting on the couch, a movie playing low just to fill the silence. Her cat, the imaginary one, still didn't exist, but she reached to pet the air beside her like it used to curl there. The gesture was soft, absent-minded, heartbreakingly human. "You ever miss things that weren't good for you?" she asked suddenly. "Every day," I said. She turned to me then, eyes searching my face. "You're too young to mean that." I smiled faintly. "And you're too smart to believe it." Something shifted. The screen light flickered over her skin. Thunder rolled in the distance. She leaned slightly toward me, and for a moment, all I could hear was the slow rhythm of her breathing. The phone broke it. A sharp vibration on the coffee table. Her name lighting up the screen beside mine. A man's name, Elliot. She froze, didn't answer, just stared at it until it stopped ringing. I pretended not to notice, but the silence stretched thin. "He's just someone who checks in," she said, voice steady but low. I didn't ask more. I didn't have the right to. Her hand drifted to her wine glass, then hesitated halfway. The distance between us felt unbearable. Not for lack of touch, but for how much we both wanted to close it. When the thunder cracked again, she flinched. Reflexively, her fingers caught my sleeve. Just a second. A tug, a pulse of warmth through the fabric. Neither of us spoke. Her hand stayed there longer than it should have, the pressure light but trembling. Then she pulled back, voice barely above a whisper. "This is a bad idea." "Yeah," I said, my pulse still racing. "Probably." But neither of us moved away. Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle. The movie credits rolled, silent on the screen. She turned off the TV, and in the dark reflection of the window, our faces were side by side, close enough that I could feel her breath when she exhaled. Then she whispered, "You should go." But her body didn't shift, didn't open space for me to pass. We stood there too long, caught between fear and want, the storm finally breaking somewhere inside the walls. She hadn't called or texted in 3 days. 3 days of silence that filled every space I walked through. I told myself to leave it, that maybe the storm had broken something we shouldn't fix. But by the 4th night, I was at her door again. No umbrella, just the keys she'd forgotten I still had. When she opened the door, her face went through 3 expressions in a heartbeat. Surprise, then something like relief, then the quiet dread of knowing she'd been caught feeling both. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I know." Then quieter. "So why are you?" I didn't answer. The rain on my jacket was dripping onto her hardwood floor. She didn't seem to care. She stepped aside, and I walked in. The house smelled like jasmine and rain. She had a record playing low, something old, slow, with too much longing in it. Mara stood by the table, arms crossed, but not angry. Just tired of pretending she didn't want what she did. "You can't keep showing up like this," she said. "Then tell me to stop." Her lips parted, but no words came. I took 1 step closer. The floor creaked under my weight. "You think I don't see how this looks?" she said finally. "You're young enough to start over. People would talk." "Let them," I said. "I'm not here for them." Her eyes flashed, something between anger and hunger. "You don't understand what this would mean for me." "Then explain it," I said, my voice low, "because every time I walk away, I can still feel you like you never left." She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "Don't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I believe you," she said, and the words broke somewhere in the middle. The record skipped once, a small crack of static that made her flinch. I reached out before thinking. My hand brushed her arm, slid up until my fingers found the edge of her jaw. She didn't move, didn't breathe. Her skin was warm, her pulse visible at her throat. "Tell me to stop," I whispered. She didn't. Her hand came up, fingers trembling as they touched my chest. I felt the smallness of it, the hesitation, the push and pull of everything we weren't saying. "You don't know what you're asking for," she murmured. "Ido." Her eyes flicked down to my mouth, then back up. The air between us was electric, painful in its closeness. For a second, I thought she'd close the distance. She leaned in barely, enough for her breath to brush my cheek. Then a sound broke the moment. The phone again. Same name, Elliot. She froze. Her hand slipped away. The spell cracked open. I stepped back, but my voice came out rough, almost shaking. "Who is he to you?" She looked at me, something dark moving behind her eyes. "Someone I used to be brave for," she said. "Before I forgot how." The phone stopped ringing. She turned it face down on the table, then looked at me like she was choosing between fire and air. "Don't make me remember," she whispered. But it was too late. The next morning, I told myself it was over. I even meant it. I didn't text, didn't walk past her house, didn't look for her car in the driveway. But on the 3rd evening, she called. Just 1 line, her voice raw and quiet through the phone. "Can you come by?" She didn't say why. I didn't ask. When I got there, the lights were dim. She looked different. Not composed like usual, but softer, almost fragile. Her sweater sleeves were pushed up, her hair loose like she'd stopped caring how it fell. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. The tone made my stomach knot. I thought maybe it was about Elliot. Maybe she'd finally explain. But what she said instead knocked the air out of me. "It wasn't just about the house," she began. "I told you it was for the cat, the plants, but I needed someone around." She looked up at me, eyes glassy. "After he left, the silence got too loud. Couldn't sleep. I just wanted another heartbeat in the room." I didn't know what to say. Every version of her I'd imagined. Calm, mysterious, untouchable. Shattered into something painfully human. She went on. "I didn't mean for this to happen. You were just supposed to make it feel less empty." "And now?" I asked quietly, She didn't answer. Instead, she moved past me to close the window, her shoulder brushing mine. The scent of rain on her skin hit me again. Clean, sharp, familiar. I turned to her before she'd fully straightened. So that's all this is? Filling space. Her breath caught. Don't make it sound small. Then what is it? Her silence said everything. Then the knock came, sharp, insistent. Mara froze. I glanced toward the door, but she didn't move. Her face drained of color. Who? I started, but she cut me off. Don't, she whispered. Please, just stay quiet. The knocking stopped. Then a man's voice carried through the wood. Low, careful. Mara, it's me. Can we talk? Elliot. She pressed her back against the wall, breathing fast. He wasn't supposed to come here. What does he want? Her voice trembled. He wants to fix something that's already broken. We stood there in silence, inches apart, her pulse jumping at her throat. The door handle rattled once, then went still. When it was finally quiet again, she turned to me. Too close, her voice a whisper against my chest. I told you not to make me remember, she said. But you did. Her hand came up, almost resting against my jaw, then stopped halfway, hovering. I caught it before it fell. Then stop pretending you don't want this. She closed her eyes, shaking her head. It's not that simple. It never is. The sound of the door unlocking echoed from the front of the house. We both froze, still holding each other's breath. This time, neither of us moved away. The sound of the key turning in the lock froze time. Mara's eyes shot to mine, wide, terrified, alive. Then she moved. Swift, quiet. She caught my wrist, pulled me toward the hallway. I followed without thinking. We stood pressed against the wall beside the kitchen, barely breathing as the front door creaked open. Mara! The man's voice carried through the still air. It's raining again. I didn't want to. He stopped. The sound of his shoes on the hardwood paused. Mara closed her eyes. Her grip on my wrist tightened. A silent plea, or maybe an apology. Couldn't tell. For a moment, it felt like the house itself was deciding whether to reveal us. Then, mercifully, the door shut again. His footsteps retreated down the porch. The car engine started. Silence. Her hand was still on me. Slowly, she turned, her back against the wall, breath trembling in the small space between us. I can't keep doing this, she whispered. Hiding. Pretending I don't. Her voice broke off, the rest of it hanging in the charged air. You don't what? I said. My voice came out low, raw. She opened her eyes then, glassy, wet with something too deep to name. Don't feel like myself when you're here, she said. Everything I swore I'd outgrow. It all comes back. I stepped closer, close enough that her sweater brushed my chest. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, I said. She let out a shaky laugh. You don't know what it's like to want something you shouldn't. Don't I? For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then I reached up, slowly, and brushed a damp strand of hair from her face. She didn't flinch. Her eyes fluttered shut, and her breath caught when my fingers grazed her cheek. Mara. She opened her eyes at the sound of her name. It felt like saying it gave her permission to breathe again. Her hand came up to my chest, palm flat, feeling the unsteady rhythm beneath. This isn't supposed to happen, she whispered. But it already did. She looked up at me then, really looked, and whatever she'd been fighting slipped away. Our foreheads touched first. Small, tentative. Her breath mingled with mine, warm and fragile. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. And then the distance vanished. Not a kiss, not yet. Just the inevitability of one, hovering in the breath between us. Her fingers tightened in my shirt, pulling me closer until there was no space left to lie. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a sound. If I let this happen, it changes everything. I nodded, my voice just a whisper against her skin. Maybe that's what it's supposed to do. She exhaled. A soft, trembling surrender that wasn't quite yes but wasn't no either. The world outside the window flickered with lightning, And for one suspended second, we both stopped running. The storm passed overnight. By morning, the world outside her windows was quiet. Trees dripping, sky pale and heavy with light. We hadn't moved much. She sat beside me on the couch, her knees drawn up, a blanket draped loosely over her shoulders. Between us, the space that once felt unbearable was now easy, like the house had finally exhaled. Neither of us said, "What now?" We just let the silence settle in its gentler shape. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. I thought I'd forgotten what this kind of peace felt like. I smiled faintly. "You mean the quiet?" "No," she said, glancing sideways at me. "The company." She reached for her mug, fingers brushing mine in the process. This time, she didn't pull away. There was no grand confession, no perfect line. Just the small, real things that make people stay. A look held too long, a breath that didn't break. She told me about her marriage. Not the details, just the ending. How years can pass beside someone without ever really being seen. And I told her about my own half-built life, the jobs I started and dropped, the feeling of floating through everyone else's plans. It wasn't romance in the movie sense. It was two people finding a still point after too much noise. At one point, she laughed. Really laughed. The sound raw and unguarded. "You make me feel ridiculous," she said, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. "Good ridiculous or bad?" Her smile faltered, but only a little. "The kind that scares me." I leaned closer, my voice low. "Maybe that's what being alive feels like." She didn't argue. We ended up in the garden out back, her hands in the soil, mine helping to steady a crooked planter. The sun had come out by then, and when she straightened, a streak of dirt marked her cheek. Without thinking, I reached out and brushed it away with my thumb. Her eyes met mine, calm, unhurried, the kind of look that feels like a decision being made. Then she stepped forward and rested her forehead against my chest. Just that, no rush, no fear. Her fingers curled into my shirt. "I don't care what anyone thinks," she whispered. "Good," I said, wrapping my arms around her. "Neither do I." We stood there for a long time, the garden warm and bright around us, the world finally quiet enough to listen. Her hand found mine. Steady now, no hesitation, and she looked up with a half-smile that reached her eyes. "Stay for breakfast?" she asked. I nodded. "Only if you burn the toast again." She laughed, low and certain this time. "Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?"